and directly from the living faith. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Father in heaven, you have given us the night as a time for rest, and you know how much I need it today. You also know that sometimes slumber can be hard to come by, and the minutes go by slowly when I cannot sleep. I ask you for a good night's sleep, but even more, I ask that you fill me, awake or asleep, with a sense of your loving presence. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about Father Barry. Father Barry and I and a couple of others in the room were on the committee.
Parish advisor.
Parish advisory team. So what we did was we went to various meetings, presentations that Barry had, and we would critique him and told him, high points, low points, things he should continue, things he should not. And so,
Frankie Byrne homilies.
No.
Reflections back there.
And not only did he serve 2 years as our seminarian, but he also helped out in youth group when we helped out in youth group that year as well. And he holds a very special place in my heart, as well as a number of you guys, because this is the biggest group ever. Father Barry was ordained priest last June 8th? Okay, June 8th of 2013, and it was such a beautiful event. And
Here.
Yes, here.
Our new church. Build a church for us.
I get that one in your cabinet, because it was a different church, But anyway, he's grown up to be a fine young priest, and he's going to go off and do wonderful things. But before he goes off to another parish, I'd like to, welcome him to speak here for Ladies Club.
Thank you. Yeah, let's do that right now. Let's give it as we speak, because I only made 40 copies because it's the maximum I will be here. So.
I would like to make an announcement about that. Anybody who's signed in and given us their email address, I would be happy if Father Barry sends it to me to send it out to all of you, for anybody who doesn't have it.
I don't know Janice very well, but she seems very good at what she does. Yeah, sure. And also, if you're a couple, just take one. I mean, in matrimony, you become one.
Thank you.
This may be a short talk tonight because I don't have a microphone and my voice is sort of soft. So, make it out of this one easy. As I'm handing out the papers, I want to speak a little bit about myself, because I know many of you here, but there's also some who I haven't had the blessing to get to know. My name is Barry Cuba. I've been a priest for almost a year now. It's been about 10 months. It's been one of the most roller coaster years of my life, and I'll get into that a little bit with my talk. One of the things that they taught me in seminary is that most of the time at talks or homilies, people are not going to remember almost anything that you say, but they will remember how they feel as you said it. And they'll gauge very quickly whether you're a source that can be trusted or not. And so you may have someone come up to you 10 years after being in a parish who has never talked to you before, but they feel like you're a trusted source because they heard your homilies over the last 10 years. So you may not get to know someone, but they may get to know you. And that really affected me a lot. And so if there's anything that I could do tonight, it's that I want to give you a little bit of my story so that you get a sense of who I am. And if this provokes any kinds of thoughts or questions in your mind, you might be able to contact me afterwards. I'll give you my email or something. My story. I chose the topic, resting with God, prayer in the midst of stress, burdens, and anxiety, because I grew up with pretty intense anxiety and didn't really even recognize it until about 2 years ago. Actually, until after I left St. Vincent de Paul. A lot of you know my mom, so I'm on thin ice here. But I love my mom tremendously. She's my best friend. But she did it alone. She raised me alone. And so she had a lot of pressure on her. And I can remember back to some of my earliest memories, her just really drilling in me, you need to do this to succeed. And if you don't do this, you will not succeed. So I remember bringing home B's on my tests and seeing the look on her face when I brought home a B, as opposed to when I brought home an A. And I said, I never want to see that look on her face when I bring home a B ever again. So I'm only ever going to bring home A's. And that happened. And I guess I was unaware until recently how much pressure I felt, not just from her, but from school and from other places to succeed. And to totally define my identity by what I accomplish. And I'm going to throw this topic out here before you because I think it's important, because I see it in a lot of college students today in my ministry at Texas A&M. I guess I should introduce them. My first assignment as a priest is as an associate pastor at St. Mary's at Texas A&M. And I'm there with Father Jonathan Brea and Father David Conderla, who's been there for a while. So we have 3 priests there. There aren't a lot of places in our diocese that have 3 priests, so it's a sacrifice that Bishop Vasquez makes because he really believes in our future, and he really believes in our Catholic campuses. Even our secular campuses that tend to take on a Catholic character. But I see in a lot of the students that I work with this idea of I am what I do. So I entered seminary right after high school. Hindsight's 2020. But I entered seminary right after high school. And for some of you who may know someone who's in seminary, or you might even be able to quiz Sean on this, or Tom Reitmeyer, when they mentioned that I was here for pastoral year, I did like a few years ago what Sean was doing now, but a few years ago, or like Tom Reitmeyer last year did, but a few years ago. So that's what pastoral year is. You can quiz them on this, but when I entered seminary, I entered in 2004, and you might remember in Boston, in 2002 was when all the scandals broke out. So the culture of seminary shifted almost like a car crashing into another car with whiplash. The amount of rigor and expectation on the seminarian escalated exponentially to almost what I would say is I can safely say now that I'm a priest, is to the other side of the pendulum. It was a culture of extreme fear in seminary during my time here. And that if you said something wrong or did something wrong, you were out. Because they could not risk a priest that could cause any kind of damage, physical, emotional, or spiritual in the future. So Jesus Christ, I'm fully convinced, could not get through seminary like that. But it basically meant that for about 6 of my 9 years in seminary, it was a game. It was a game of I need to say what I need to say to get through, and I need to be perfect. So I took that anxiety that I inherited from just being young, and the seminary, it was like fertilizer. It really made me to where I didn't know it at all the time, but I was always operating out of fear as my main source of motivation for anything. Fear of failure, fear of not pleasing somebody. So much so that you get these. They mentioned that they were on this parish advisory team. So even then, like even when you go out into a parish, they won't let you be alone. You can always have eyes on you. So it's a good thing. You need evaluation. You need eyes on you. You need that sort of thing. But with my personality, I took it to a whole new level of any time I made any mistake in the day, I could not sleep during the night. I'll take my glasses off, and you can see even now I have permanent bags under my eyes. It's not just due to my Czech heritage. It's due to the fact that since about 7 years old, I've been afraid to fail at almost anything that I've ever done. And I bring that in front of you today because we don't have enough time for games. We don't have enough time for me to look perfect or good. I would not give up my weakness for anything, because it's what's made me the priest that I am. And I think that we all, if we're not a part of this, our kids are, our grandkids are, this culture of total definition by what we accomplish. And I don't know if we fully understand how much this has permeated the culture, to where even on Facebook, someone goes through 80 photos until they find the profile picture. That picture that they want other people to see of them. To where they fully define themselves by this one slice of their life that they want to put out there for somebody. So I would say, this is not something, I'm not speaking to you as someone who's an anxiety expert that has figured this all out. I'm speaking to you to someone that's in the middle of the hurricane, and every so often I get a chance to step into the eye of it and go, oh wow, this is what's going on. It's coming back, getting me again. It's something that I'm currently dealing with and helping a lot of students to deal with. It's something that I think a lot of people subconsciously deal with. We medicate very well, I think, in the United States, the symptoms of this. And I would never go against any professional advice from someone in the medical field or in the psychological field, because I've talked to them both. I've been there and done that in the last few years. And, but I think that it's symptomatic of our culture. This idea of go, 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 do, do, do. If you fail, you're done, you survive. And it could be in the job world, it could be in the family world. And as soon as you feel like, oh, I'm doing well, something comes on TV or a new neighbor moves in who looks like it's doing it better, and you compare and you despair. So that's the context of my talk tonight, because anything that is of God has to do with peace, joy, love, fulfillment, expectations that are reaching their end. Anytime we ever feel anything that is sadness, loss, pain, grieving, that's from the evil one. And I have to throw that out there tonight because we as Americans, I think, we don't even know that we operate many times in anxiety as our default mode. But that's not where God resides. So I put that quote at the top of the page. This actually came up a few weekends ago, and I preached on it. And it was funny because Father David, my pastor, was like, ooh, how are you going to preach on this? Because you're the most nervous man I've ever met. I'll give you a little bit of what I preached on. It's that passage from Matthew, the famous one. Look at the birds in the sky. They do not sow or reap. They gather nothing in the barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you more important than they? Are not you more important than they? And it goes on and talk about, be like the wildflowers. You know, the wildflowers get their clothes and all this kind of stuff. And so the first sentence of my homily was like, I'm not a wildflower. But I talked about, I cannot understand this passage, nor can I, as who I am, ever preach on it as someone saying, do not be anxious. Because I think that we're made, in many ways, we're human, to be concerned about the future. We have to be concerned about the future. If we were like, well, I'm not going to go to my job because, wow, it's beautiful outside. We have a job. We have to be worried about our future. I think the best way to interpret Matthew 6 is to say, we're going to be anxious about something, but we need to be careful about what it is that we're anxious about. And it has to be the things of the Lord first. I've been using the word anxiety a lot, so I'm going to define it from a very enthralling textbook named Normal Psychology, 4th edition, which I read before coming here. So now I think I'm just crazy. But they distinguish between anxiety and fear. Anxiety is an unpleasant state of inner turmoil, often accompanied by nervous behavior, such as pacing back and forth, somatic complaints. Somatic just means bodily complaints. And rumination. Rumination comes from the idea of like a cow chews and chews and chews. It's called ruminating. It's like when you can't go to bed because you've been thinking about the same thoughts for like 3 or 4 hours. So I just call that a slow Tuesday. I have all of these on a continual basis. But it's distinguished from fear, which is appropriate. Fear is appropriate. you should, like if a bear is running at you, not be like, I am going to consider this bear. It's brown. It must be from the northern part of Canada. Like, you have to have fear. That's a normal reaction. But if that fear becomes something that is taking place all the time, then that it's lending itself more towards anxiety. So, what causes anxiety in our culture? I'm just going to assume that if we're not anxious, you're very blessed. I just remember when I was here at this parish, everyone seemed to be a project manager. So like, everyone was more anxious than I was. Yeah, and also during that time, I think Dell was doing layoffs or something. So like, I mean, I think that, you know, if there are times in our lives where if we're not anxious right now, we can remember being anxious, or we know someone who is, and we need to pray for them. What causes that? And my just coming back from Honduras at like midnight last night is going to color this a little bit. But I just remember going to the grocery store today, and when I was in Honduras last week, I would walk into a store and it was like bread, cheese, milk. I was like, well, I need bread, cheese, milk, so bread, cheese, and milk. Like I come into the store here, and it's like bread with this shape, you know, like and the curves inside with the little butter ring or whatever. Wheat, 100% wheat, 100% fiber wheat. And then, so what do you do with that? I think that today we're faced with this choice and competition and less time to consider our options because we're so busy and to seek out what's right. What I mean by that is, I don't think ever before in any time in history could I get a loaf of bread, put it in my cart, go home, put it on my counter, start putting a recipe together and saying, wow, I wish I had gotten that other loaf of bread from the store. It would taste so much better with this meal. And you multiply that and multiply that. That's just buying bread. But which college should my son or daughter go to? How much pressure should I put on my son or daughter to go on this college? That 4 years of their life is going to set up, the next 4 years of their life is going to set up their job. In middle school, I was taking tests to prepare me for the tests for high school, to prepare me for the tests to get into college. And crying if I failed any expectations of my mom or a teacher who was a mentor of mine. And it's only getting worse. We have all of these choices, more competition, and less time to consider our options. All the while, images are being poured in front of us of people who are making the right choices and what the right choice is. And we can feel paralyzed and then feel guilty about being paralyzed because we're not moving forward. Never before has there been a set of emotions, I think, in the human character that is so complex. And I don't think psychology has caught up with it. I don't think that we are equipped to even deal with what children are dealing with right now with social media and all of this stuff, in which it's so easy to compare ourselves with others. And where is God in all of this? When it feels like we barely have our hands on the reins, able to keep the horse going in the right direction. And we feel like we can barely have control over our lives. And we're lucky if we still have our job and we can pay our bills and all of that. And we're supposed to somehow find recreation. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine in seminary. He was from Nigeria. And I was trying to explain to him the gym. And about how, well, in my calendar, I'm going to schedule this time to go into this air-conditioned room to run on this thing that is stationary because I need to for my health, because I'm sitting in a chair the rest of the day. And he just didn't understand because he had to walk 2 miles to get water for his family before coming to America. So this idea of going into an air-conditioned building to get this requisite amount of exercise. And I remember explaining to him a garage. And I remember hearing myself say, it's like a house for a car. And seeing his face, as it registered on his mind like, we build shelter for our vehicles. When there are like human beings outside who do not have shelter. And You know, for us, of course we have a garage. We don't want bird poop on our car. Come on. But you would be amazed at how irrational that seems to so many other people. It is a house for our car. We have 3 cars, by the way. One for me, one for my husband, and one for my son or daughter. It's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. So where is God in all of this? And how can I live my own spirituality in my daily life? And what is spirituality? Because you've probably heard it preached a bunch and never really explained. I'm going to try my best to explain it to you in about 2 minutes. Spirituality is a way of encountering God. And feel free to report me to the bishop if you want. You don't have to be Catholic to have a spirituality. You can be Buddhist and have a spirituality. You can have all of this. Now, I tend to be biased and think that Catholicism is going to keep you within the borders that you need to live a life lived extremely well. And I think that other religions will participate in our spirituality to certain extents. And that's the Second Vatican Council, in which they talk about with Lumen Gentium. The Church of Christ subsists in the Catholic Church, but is connected in many ways to other churches and ecclesial communities around the world. So that's Orthodox Catholic theology. There are as many spiritualities as there are human beings on earth. We have a good subset of spiritualities when we look at the saints. Every saint lived their own spirituality. So every person in this room has a spirituality. What we've done, I think, a disservice to people in the past as a church is say, you must follow this way of living out how you encounter God. So, for example, your Catholic school. I never went to Catholic school. I went to Baptist school until 5th grade, which is where I learned the Bible. And then I went to public school because I wasn't rich enough or poor enough to go to Catholic school. I'm just going to throw that out there now. I think that's something we need to work on as a church. I think it's something we need to work on as a church. I'm being recorded. Let me just say that Catholic education is a worthy endeavor. And I support our Catholic services. What we've done to people, and I know them because I go get my hair cut and meet someone who used to be Catholic. And then I go to the grocery store and meet a checker who used to be Catholic. Then I go to the mail room and mail something at the post office to my mailman who's great, who used to be Catholic. What we've done a lot is say, open up your hand, put a rosary in it, and say, pray this. Pray this. And if someone's like, I don't know how to do this, guess what? You're a bad Catholic. Boom. You're out of here. And yay, less people that we need to fill up our churches and mass. Less people that can make us feel uncomfortable. The thing that's so beautiful about the saints is that every saint has spirituality and a way of approaching God. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. I don't actually know how long I'm supposed to speak, so someone cut me off.
Barry, you got it. It's all about you today.
All right.
It's all
about him. But one of the things I do when someone comes in to be a college student, they say, I would like some spiritual direction. Spiritual direction is an extended conversation over a long period of time with someone about their faith and how they encounter God. I'll say, okay, and I make them sit down and do a Myers-Briggs test. Some of you may know what this is. This is a psychological test, and you can find one for free online. It's not exactly as scientifically rigorous as the official one, but it also doesn't cost like $50 for them to do when they're college students. And then I get their 4 letters, and it basically speaks about how they encounter the world. So introvert, extrovert, sensing, perceiving, all of that. I won't get into that tonight because that's a topic of its own conversation. But what it does is, who am I to sit across from another person without some kind of guide to who they are? And then tell them how they're supposed to approach God? I just can't. I'm too weak to do that. I'm not even a year of a priest yet. So I get their profile and I look at it and I say, okay, I'm an extrovert, you're an introvert, so let's have a source of conversation here. And what it does is it helps because, and I explain it to people, if you're right-handed and you write down a story from your heart on a sheet of paper, you could almost do that without even thinking. If I gave you a pen for your right hand, it would be almost effortless for you. you would write that and it would be flowing and it would be perfect and it would be beautiful. You would not even know because you've done it for so long that it's your natural way of doing it. Now if I said, let me give you this pen and put it in your left hand, how would that turn out? You could probably tell that that is the same handwriting of the person if you were intuitive. You could probably see that it's a little bit shaky, a little bit hesitant, not quite as forceful, and it would take them a lot longer to fill out the page. So what I do with that then is I explain there are ways that you can pray which are intuitive, natural, and flow. And there are ways that you can pray that are not intuitive, they're not natural, and they don't flow very well. But knowing that can be very freeing, because you can pray in those ways and you can be like, I'm not supposed to like be in ecstasy when I'm doing this. It's supposed to be hard. And it's cool, and you can do that, and it's fine. So for instance, for me, I love the rosary. It's my go-to prayer as a person with extreme anxiety because it's like my anchor into the ground. It's kind of like if I don't know where I'm going and I'm looking at mile markers, I'm like, oh, okay, 2 miles left. Somehow, like at the next mile marker, I'm still concerned, like, oh, 1 mile left, or whatever. I'm still always trying to get where I'm going and where I need to go, so it's a perfect prayer for me. But if I gave my mom a rosary, she would like hang it around her neck, or put it on the car, or like her car rearview menu window or something. Or like, you know, I don't know. But, man, can my mom see someone who's suffering and go up to them and just give them a hug and kiss them on the cheek and just make them feel like part of our family in a way that I couldn't on my best day. So we all have different, I get choked up when I talk about my mom, I'm sorry. We all have ways that are more natural for us to pray, and that's okay. That's okay. And that's what I want to get to you. A lot of the anxiety in our spirituality can come from not knowing what we're supposed to do and being told we need to do something in a certain way. So I'm going to throw that out to you as an idea to think about. Because we are the Catholic Church throughout the world. You can find some saint or someone that resonates with you. For me right now in my life, it's St. Ignatius, and I put a little bit about that on this paper. St. Ignatius, Jesuit. If you think of Jesuit schools, Jesuit universities, Jesuit missionaries. Right now in my life, he's the one that's kind of resonating with me. I think that most people have a saint that's kind of like their tuning fork. You know that little thing? Someone might be a science teacher, you get a tuning fork, you hold another tuning fork up, and you just resonate. Every one of us, I think, has a saint. And if you don't even know, try to look back at the one for your confirmation, because there's an old saying that your confirmation saint is the one who chose you. But that could be a great way to look at someone that you can look up to in your faith. For me right now, St. Ignatius is just amazing. And his spirituality, his way of approaching God, is rooted in this conviction that God is active, personal, and above all present to us. So I'm experiencing God right now in all of you. Like when I say something and you laughed at me just now, Father Barry, you're a good person. You're encountering someone right now. You're making somebody laugh. I'm affirmed by God in your presence here. We don't have to withdraw from the world into a quiet place in order to find God. Now that's not to say that withdrawing is a bad thing, because there are beautiful spiritualities in which withdrawing is a major element. But in Ignatian spirituality, God's footprints can be found everywhere. So it's a spirituality, it's almost like a Sherlock Holmes spirituality. In our work and our relationships, our family, our friends, our sorrows and joys, in the sublime beauty of nature and the mundane details of our daily lives. It's often said that Ignatian spirituality trains us to find God in all things. So I was running the other day, something I'm still trying to do, not as much as when I was here, but running is a great way to relieve stress or anxiety. So I was running in the neighborhoods, and I'm horrible with ages. So there was a girl of about 4 or 5, and she was with her dad and a friend of hers in one of these cars that you can kind of like walk in and ride, sort of this Flintstone style. And so she looks at me as I'm running and she screams out, this is a girl, she screams out, I'm the king of the world! So I guess like Dad was playing Titanic or something. So I went back and I knelt down and I said, are you sure you're the king of the world? Because you look absolutely to me like a princess. And so she smiles really big, And she says, I'm a princess. And then she turns back to her dad and says, Daddy, I'm a princess. And so I ran and I was like, what does that teach me right now? As I get back to my work, in which I'm working with college girls, is that every girl is yearning to feel special in that way by someone. And they'll often look in places that are not good for that affection. But every girl at a young age just feels awesome when she's called a princess. And that just became a very, that became a moment of my prayer. But if that had stopped at just being a conversation, and I just kept on running, it would not help me in my ministry as a priest to women who are 18, 19, 20, 21, about to make some very significant decisions in their life. And how many times in our day do these moments come from our Lord that we don't even think about because we're thinking about the next thing? It's extremely difficult to be anxious about the past or the future and totally present to a person or a moment at the same time. I'll say that again. It's extremely difficult to be anxious or worried about the future or the past if you're totally present to a person or a moment. So I find that when I'm totally present to a person, it's one of the few times in my life where I'm not worried about my future or some of my mistakes in the past. So this prayer style is one that has lasted in the church, has stood the test of time, Ignatian spirituality. This idea that we don't have to go on a mountain somewhere to encounter God, but it's in the daily grind of our everyday lives that we encounter God. And the only reason that we can't see Him is because He's so close to us. There was a great cartoon I saw once about someone holding out their arms and they're saying, "Where are you, Lord? Where are you, Lord? I can't see you. I can't find you." And it's because his face is in God's pant leg. Like us. But that's the place where we connect with God, is in our daily lives. Which means we have dignity, and that the choices we make a difference and can bring us closer to Him. I'll tell a little bit of my story here, and kind of my first few years of getting really active in the ministry and then leading in the priesthood, and in my first year of priesthood. When I was here at St. Vincent de Paul, I would say my motivation was largely to please Father Danny, to please the staff, to please Shirley and Josie and everybody. To be a good seminary, to be kind of remembered, once I'm gone. To please my mom and let her know that this is what I was meant to do, to please my bishop and let him make me a priest. So I became a deacon, and then I was like, well, I was actually deacon at Seminary, so I've been there for 2 years now, actually. So I was like, I need to please Father David. I need to get all of this stuff set so that I can be a priest. I just had this goal in my mind, be a priest. And so Father David, he knew I was going to be assigned there as a priest. I did not know that yet. He's privy to that information because he's on the Presbyteral Council. As is Father Danny, but now Father Danny's privy to everything because he's number 2 in the diocese. Hope you're not watching this, Danny.
He knows where you are right now.
I have a chip that he can locate. So Father David says, so I'm walking in one day. It was like my last week to serve at St. Mary's as a deacon. And he puts 2 glasses out and puts some ice in them. And then he takes some bourbon that someone had given us as a gift, so we have to use it. That would be uncharitable if we did not use it. So he pours it into 2 glasses, and he hands me one. And he says, "Sit down, Barry." I said, "Okay." And he said, "Let me tell you what my wish is when you go to work at your new parish with your new pastor." Granted, he knew it was going to be my new parish. He said, "My one desire for you and what I pray for you is that one day you'll be able to walk into a room and know that the room is better because you're in it, and quit trying to earn the fact that you're in the room or apologize for the fact that you're in the room." And so I took a sip, and he took a sip, and I said, okay. And he said, okay, and we turned on the TV. That's one of the longest conversations probably had with him. But it's something that I thought about a lot. Because he knew that that one conversation wasn't going to change me. What happened shortly after that was they asked me if I would go on to study canon law, and I said, sure. So I got to St. Mary's and was balancing my schoolwork for Washington, D.C., which I do online classes, volunteering and helping out at the tribunal for annulment cases, and then working at St. Mary's and driving in and out to Austin. And so someone would say, hey, can I meet with you? And I'd say, well, I really scheduled prayer time and exercise during this day, but man, I should be meeting with you because I am a priest, and I need to be a good priest. And so I was defining myself by what I accomplished and just kept going and going. And I remember one day Father Jonathan, who's the other associate, asked to meet with me. And I said, oh, I can't meet with you. He said, let me see your calendar. And he saw that I had an 8 a.m. Mass, a 9 o'clock meeting, a 9:30 meeting, a 10 a.m. Mass, a 11 o'clock meeting, an 11:30 meeting, and a 12 noon Mass. Not enough time to even use the restroom. And he told me once, he said, meetings aren't like cells. You can't just divide them and have as many as you want. You need to focus on looking at each person individually and really caring about each person. But I said, no. So my third month there at St. Mary's as a priest, one night I was talking to Father Jonathan, and he said, how are you doing, man? How are you doing? I said, oh, I'm good. And he said, are you really doing good? And I got paralyzed. I broke down and I started crying in front of him, and we sat down. And I said, I feel like I'm just waking up early in the morning, meetings, Mass, confessions, meetings, and just, at the end of the day, hoping that I can get enough energy to, wake up and do it all over again, like Groundhog Day. And he said, that doesn't sound like heaven, that sounds like hell. And it was because I was defining myself by what I do, and I was so scared of disappointing anybody. I think one of the freeing things of disappointment, of anxiety, is realizing that we can disappoint people, and it's okay to disappoint people if we know who we are. If we know who we are and are grounded in who we are. One of the biggest blessings for me during this Honduras trip that I went on last week with these students from Texas A&M, we did a mission trip. Here I am complaining because, I have all these emails and I have all this stuff. So I got to sub for a priest in his parish. His parish is a church that's about this size. And he has 72 other communities that are churches that he has to go and visit because they just don't have priests down there. And which means that all of these communities get Mass maybe once a year, or if they're really competitive, they'll get Mass twice a year. And we were laughing because we were celebrating Mass together on the last day, and he said, I have the blessing of knowing that I could never get a fraction of the work that I could ever get done. So someone passes away in an aldea. An aldea is these small mountain communities. He may have to get up there in 3 weeks to do the service. So bury the person, get it taken care of, and I'll come up in 3 weeks to do the service. Is someone going to be disappointed? Sure, but that's what you got to do because you do the best you can with where you're at when you're at. And that just hit me wow. I guess St. Mary's really was awesome before I got there. And I guess it will survive after I go. And I think this isn't just a story about me. I think it's a story about all of us and all of our jobs and all of the things that we do. We help out and we do the best that we can. And do we sometimes, even in our families, make the wrong decisions or say the wrong thing and could have done something better? Sure. But who knows? That area of weakness in your child or in your friend may be something that helps them to become strong. I am very nervous in front of you right now. I am extremely nervous in front of you right now. It's It's something that took years of work in seminary to be able to even look people in the eye to talk. But I remember a priest telling me, you should always be nervous if it's something that you care about. I would be very nervous if you ever got up in front of the people of God and you weren't scared, because they deserve the best. So you give them the best and you be nervous, because they're worth it. They're worth you being nervous. So that was all just, believe it or not, context, but that's how I like to talk, is if I give you a huge view of things, they'll hopefully become like hangars in which you can rest certain events and things that are going on in your daily life, in sort of the context of the grand scheme of things. I'm going to give you some tips of how I'm coming out of my own anxiety, not just as a man, but as someone who professes to be a Christian and professes that it's Jesus who saves, and in Christ there's no such thing as fear. Oh, okay. Louder?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Don't speak anymore.
Okay. The first thing. I'm a delicate flower. I told you that. Lily in the field. So, the first thing that I said I'm going to do is I said, you know what? I'm going to use, world that's trying to keep me down. I'm going to use you against yourself. The calendar. Each of us has the calendar, right? The calendar which runs our lives. The calendar which tells us what we can do and what we can't do. And the calendar that gives us this piece of paper can allow us to say no to someone that we care about something because we've already made a prior commitment. The calendar. Whoever invented the calendar, I don't know if it was the Mayans or what. No wonder the world is going to be destroyed or what. They invented the calendar. Well, I say, you know what, calendar? I'm going to use you against yourself. So any important meeting that I have during the day, because of my character, I don't miss. Because if I had a meeting with the doctor, if I had a meeting with my pastor, I would never miss that meeting, at all, because there would be consequences and repercussions. So what I did is I've started blocking off in my calendar 15 or 30 minutes of prayer during the day. And I say, guess what? That counts just as much as a regular meeting. And it has to. So if someone comes up and they say, do you have that time free? You say, no, I don't, because I've already blocked it off in my calendar. And no one needs to know what you blocked it off for. If they're like, what do you got in that space? You say. I don't ask you what you got in your space. We ain't comparing calendars. You're just asking me if I can do this or not. But for real. For real. And if we really believe all of this stuff, we're going to Triduum Mass because we believe that Jesus Christ is resurrected. We're going to Saturday or Sunday Mass because we really believe it. We're paying all of this money to send our kids to Catholic schools because we really believe it. Then that should be an important meeting in our day. Shouldn't it? I mean, shouldn't the boss, the CEO of our lives, the one who gives us every breath that we take, be an important meeting? So even if it starts with 10 minutes over coffee, or 15 minutes, treat God with the same dignity you treat any person who gives you a call and asks for any moment of your time. Give him a spot in your calendar. You'd be amazed. That just in itself works wonders. So if you're anxious or you're like, oh, I'm too busy, make your busyness your ally. And then make your busyness, push away the other busyness and say, before I do anything else, mornings often work better than evenings. Before I do anything else, 15 minutes with God. How you do that? Whatever. I don't care. Maybe you'll take this Myers-Briggs test, shoot me an email and say, how should I pray? Am I more Franciscan or Thomistic? Read a book. Say a rosary. Sing. I don't care. I guarantee if you intentionally put 15 minutes aside for God, He takes care of that. He takes care of that. And He will give you whatever you need. You'll be like, I don't know what I'm going to do in this 15 minutes. And you'll be in Barnes & Noble as you say that in this book called 15 Minutes with God. Or you just Google, how do I pray in 15 minutes? We have so many resources available, but we use them to push God away instead of allow God in. Another thing too is know your personality type. Know your personality type. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're an introvert and you're like, wow, I want to be closer to God, and you are like, the only way I can do this is to go to this social, with people, you're going to not feel happy. Or if you're an extrovert and you're in the centering prayer group, sitting here like this for 30 minutes, listening to the sound of your breathing, you're not going to be happy. So switch groups with your person. But we have a rich tapestry of faith. There's no excuse to not find any way that you can't feel fulfilled in prayer. Because you can just change up a century, move forward or back a century, and you've got like a whole other way of approaching the church. It's wonderful. Another thing too is take control of your negative thoughts when they happen. This could be a talk on its own. I'll give you a couple techniques that I use. So I get done, this is really into my life. So I'll get done with Mass, and I'm shaking hands with people, and they're like, good to see you today, good to see you today. Oh, wonderful weather. I'm like, wow, no one's saying good homily. I do that too. If I'm visiting and I'm incognito, I'm out at the church or another or something like that, and I'm kind of like, that wasn't really a good homily. Like I'll be like, Father, beautiful church or something. So people are telling me beautiful church, they love the Aggies, maroon's a beautiful color, anything but good homily. So I'll go home and I'll say, wow, I did not preach well today. Where did that thought come from? Totally, illogical. There's no data, no strata of data to ever kind of say that that's what actually happened. It came from an own sense of, I don't know, lack of self-identity, lack of self-worth, years of stuff that I couldn't pay a counselor for. I don't know. But growing up without a dad, could be lots of that kind of stuff. So what I do sometimes, and this is going to sound really ridiculous to you, but I encourage you to be open-minded about this. I'll change it up to say, I feel like I did not preach well today. And that even in itself will put distance toward the negative thought. Or, and this is for you visual people, if you have a negative thought like, I am a bad mother, or my son hates me, or I am going to fail this exam, or just something that is paralyzing you. Imagine you've got a Word document open, and I know everyone here at St. Vincent and Paul uses Word documents or Excel. Use your favorite spreadsheet program or whatever, and type it in. Just type it in. I'm going to fail at this thing. And then change the font. Change the font size. Make it vertical. Make it horizontal. Put a little smiley face at the end of it, and you realize it's just words. It's just words. It's one set of a larger set of data. And it doesn't have that control over you as much anymore. You can at least get enough sense to breathe and distance yourself from it so that you can think a little bit more clearly. Another thing is, and I mentioned it before, don't limit how God can speak to you throughout the day, through everything, positive and negative. Every living, breathing moment is a breath of the voice of God for us. We can see something on the news that's a negative story and be like, oh, the news is awful. It's all so negative. But we can say, wow, there's still hunger in the world. There's still thirst for righteousness and justice. And allow that to be a moment of prayer for us. If you really get good at it, it's an art. It's an art to... It's almost like God serves you your world and its ingredients. And you can say, what kind of recipe am I going to make out of this in my prayer? I can make something that's burnt or bad, or I can just not cook and starve. Or I can look at my day and say, wow, I think these ingredients would go well together and make something that's beautiful, and make a work of art, make something that I can consume and it will nourish me. So if we look at that, God provides us ingredients, and we have a full pantry. We can have a beautiful prayer and make a meal of it. That's just something I throw out there for you people who are like visual learners and stuff. Another thing, too, that's worth its own talk is forgiveness. Forgiveness is huge. And at the end of the talk, I don't know how much time we'll have, but I opened it up. I'm still working on, like people ask me about forgiveness all the time. I'm still working on girls from high school. Like, I'm the worst when it comes to forgiveness, actually. I'm supposed to be good at it, but not a year yet. So, 3 more months before I can take this essential teaching and internalize it. But what I tell people about is forgiveness and letting things go. We'll often hear that. We say, oh, you should forgive. Or forgive 70 times, 7 times, all that. But what does that even mean? What does it even mean to forgive somebody? Are you supposed to just feel good all of a sudden and just go up to them and hug them and love them and just think they're the greatest person in the world? I use this example for forgiveness. And I offer it to you, and feel free to poke holes in it if you want. But this is the only way I can make sense out of forgiveness. You have a person or a situation that happened that is awful. Just awful. You feel like you can't let it go. It's bothering your sleep. It's bothering your day. You can't stop. So imagine you're standing across from this person or this situation. And it's right here. It's in your gut. You're feeling it with your body. It's that somatic stuff. And it's bothering you so much that you're tense when you think about it. Imagine it's like a tug of war. You're pulling up against this idea. And there's this pit. There's this pit in between you both. And one of you is going to go in, and Lord help you want that other thing to go in. You want revenge. You want something. So you're in this situation, and it's tiring you. Mentally, physically, and spiritually. Because you can't let it go. So what are your choices in that situation? You can pull that thing down into the pit. Revenge, passive aggressiveness, just talking behind their back, triangulating. You can do all sort of things to hurt that person and maybe weaken them so that they also fall and they feel bad and they feel awful. Or you can let that pull you into sadness, despair, depression. What's another thing that you can do? Let go of the rope. Let go of the rope. A lot of people don't get that. And it doesn't mean that that person is not standing across from you from the pit. It doesn't erase any of the feelings. But it means that situation doesn't have to have power over you. That person doesn't have to have power over you anymore. And it's not an instant process of letting go of the rope. I have students that will come once a week to me and confess that they can't forgive a person. And I give them a hug and I say, let's work on that. Let's keep working on it. So it's not one just letting go of the rope. It can sometimes take years to let go of the rope. But the only person who's supposed to have any kind of power over us is God. Honestly. I mean, if we really believe, I'm everything I've spoke about tonight, I'm operating under the assumption that we really believe God exists and that we're Catholics and we really believe that this stuff is important and actually shapes our lives. So, we're not being told to forgive because God's saying forgive, and it's like, if you don't, it's a bad thing and you're going to get punishment. It's because not forgiving itself is a punishment that we place on ourselves. Every law that God gives us is a good thing. The first law that we have is that there's 6 days of the week, take one off. That's the first law of God. The people will always say, why are the laws of God bringing us down? And I say, I'm getting off here a little bit, but I'll try to wind it down and finish. Every sentence of Scripture, every law of God that we're given, and I really try to get this into the students' minds, is to free us. And I give them the example of a card deck. A card deck with 52 cards. You sit there with it, and you look at it, and you say, this is nice. It's got aces, kings, queens, and jacks. But until you put rules to it, you can't have fun. You can't flourish. So you say, we're going to play a game and we're going to call it 5-card poker. And in 5-card poker, the ace means this, the king means this, the queen means this. You can combine it in this ways. And if you stood there and you said, oh, the man is keeping me down like with these rules, you could never, ever, ever laugh and play with your friends with this game. So God creates the universe. He creates the universe. That in itself is amazing. It's a blessing. And then he says, guess what? I want you guys to have a good time. So these are some rules. And we go, rules? What rules? Ah, you're bringing me down. You're keeping me from doing things. That's our first response. And I can only imagine the sadness in God's heart when we won't even play the game because we feel like we're being restricted by the rules. When it's the very rules and laws themselves which are allowing us to achieve joy. Not just hopping from moment to moment of happiness to kind of ease the ache a little bit, but to a moment of lasting and utter joy can only come when we understand and play by the rules of the game. And it's a game. It's fun. Like the law. Every psalm you read, I guarantee you, flip open to the middle of your Bible and you'll find like, the law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The decrees of the Lord are just, like honey from the rock. So anything that we have, like when Jesus is telling the apostles, you have to forgive. He's telling them that, not because it's like, you have to, and you've got to feel bad about it, but it's because your soul will be heavy and weighed down if you can't. If you can't forgive. Forgiveness is less about the other person, and it's more about yourself and not letting them be an anchor to you and letting you stay in one position. So forgiveness is a process. It's not forgetting. And in many cases, I will advise people, if they've forgiven someone, it doesn't mean you have to go back and talk to them again. Because that other person may not be in a place to accept that forgiveness. They may hurt you even more. But forgiveness is essentially a process of saying, I'm not going to allow this bad situation or this person to change the trajectory of my life in a way that leads me away from God. A great way, it's easing anxiety if you see it in the right way. If you see it as forgiving is supposed to necessitate feelings of joy and happiness about the other person, it's only going to lead to more anxiety because you're like, why am I not able to forgive? It's okay to forgive a person and not want to be in the same room with them again. That's fine. That's Catholic. You're not a bad person for wanting that. I mean, you only get punched so many times before you say, you know what, I'm going to put my hands up. You can have dignity like that. So I just wanted to close with that little bit of forgiveness because I think it's something that's often misunderstood in our Catholic tradition and not preached on enough in a context that's more mature. Last thing I'll say is there's a prayer that St. Ignatius practiced that I've found to be very good in my own life. This may not be your path towards spirituality. This may not be your way of naturally approaching God, but this is mine, so I share it with you. And that, with that caveat. This is a way that I try to pray, if I can daily. I should daily. I don't. I also fail at this. I'm going to put a website down there that explains each step in there. It's in the middle of the page in bold. The first is to become aware of God's presence. Because right now, it's our natural mode of operation to just assume that God is not in the moment and that you're listening to some 28-year-old dude talk to you about his life and his struggles. And you don't naturally think that God's actually present in the moment. Or like at the end of the day before you go to bed, that he's present in that moment. So you sometimes have to consciously, it's like a computer, your mind's got all these other programs open, so you've got to double click on the app that's like, God is present, and then you're like, oh, God is present. And then you review the day with gratitude. This is a hard one, because the day could have been awful. But at least you're still breathing to review the day. And it doesn't mean that you don't look at things that could have gone wrong or that you could have done better. But you review the day with a sense of gratitude that even on the worst day, you might get another day tomorrow to work on that or to fix that or at least head in the right direction. Then number 3 is something that I think maybe 2% of anyone in the world ever does, is pay attention to your emotions. And you can do that as you're reviewing your day. Someone's face comes up in your mind like, oh, why did I get mad at that? And then the ability to even say, why did I get mad at that, is itself distancing yourself enough to look at the situation more objectively. Number 4 is something that I alluded to earlier. Choose one feature of the day and pray from it. This is hard because we're going to want to do like 8 different things. But we're not going to want to because it's too painful. But you might want to pick one thing and say one conversation, or one person that came in and shook my hand, or one moment in which I succeeded greatly, or one moment in which I failed. And choose that as your material for prayer. And it can be super hard, which is awesome when it is. Or it can not be hard at all. It could just be a very similar day, which is great. Because you're bringing it, whatever it is, from the Lord. Then you look towards tomorrow. And after your review of the day, you say, how is this going to help me be a better man or woman tomorrow? Towards my husband, towards my wife, towards my children, towards people at work. Making it really hard. You say, am I supposed to be doing what I'm doing right now? That's when it gets really, really dangerous. But you look towards tomorrow. Ignatius had this beautiful, slightly creepy way of looking at any decision that you make. He said, imagine yourself on your deathbed, looking back on your life. And like, what would you wish that you would have done? So it's this idea of projecting yourself in the future. You've got 2 jobs in front of you. You're about to have this strong conversation, this significant conversation with your children, or your husband or your wife. Before you launch into it, see yourself from the future, looking back at the past and saying, what would I wish that I could have done, could have said? And it's using the beautiful ability that we have to have intellect, emotions, and rationality that God has given us to engage human beings in a dignified way. God, I could keep going. The last thing that I will say, and I will end on this, is I studied economics when I was an undergraduate. I did a business degree, and loved this idea of opportunity cost. And I've used this economic principle in my spirituality more than I have like things that I've learned in theology. So, all right. So a little refresher for those of us, it's been a while since high school or our graduate degree or undergrad degree. Opportunity cost is this idea that for any selection that we choose, there's a cost to that selection that we choose. So if you're choosing this principle in business or this material, there's a cost to that, and you're buying that keeps you from being able to buy something else. So that's the economic principle. But I look at it in the sense of sacraments. I look at it in the sense of anything. You're getting married. The cost of your yes to that person is no to everybody else. But the cost of your no to everybody else is your yes to that person as well. So people will be like, oh, how can you be a priest? Like, how did you make that decision? I'll say, oh, opportunity cost. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? But I prayed and I said, looking at my life projected from the future, what is the cost of becoming a priest? Probably saying yes to a lot of women that I could have raised a beautiful family with. But man, like, for me and my own personality, there's also a cost to saying no to the priesthood. So what we often think of, one of the greatest myths we have, two myths that I think we believe. One, that everyone around us is happy. And if we're not happy, we're not doing well. Let me just tell you, it took me 20 minutes in the confessional to that slide. That's not true. The people that look like they've got it most together are barely staying afloat. And the people we don't even notice when we walk by are saints. That's reality. Another myth that we have is that we can, if we work hard enough, if we put everything into the proper balance, we can have a perfect life and to where we're not worried anymore about something. But if one person in the world is sinning, that throws that whole equation out of balance, because it has to be super precise. I mean, all things being equal, that would mean we would all have to be virtuous and taking care of each other, and it would be this beautiful world or whatever. But no, if one person's sinning, it throws everything out of balance. So everything in our life is going to constitute an opportunity cost. You're sending your child to one college, there's a cost to that of every other college, but there's also the cost of not that other college. So basically saying that there's going to be a price to everything, every decision that you make, and that is okay. That is okay. And it's okay to feel feelings of grief after making a decision. That is natural, that's okay. Because anything good requires an element of sacrifice. There's never any situation that we can set up to where it all comes out. We have everything. So it's the principle that I sum down to: you do the best you can with where you're at and what you've got. And that's the only thing that you look at. You don't compare yourself to your neighbor. You only try to stay within the boundaries of God's will. And my closing image of this is bowling. Bowling. Any one of you ever, and if you have children, this is how it goes. I think we think sometimes, if I pray, "Dear Lord, give me the life that I need, make straight my paths, give me exactly what it is that I need," and it doesn't happen, we're like, wow, God hasn't answered our prayers, it's not working, I'm not Catholic anymore. Like, that escalated quickly. But I've tried to get to know God. I'm working on it still. There's a certain personality to God. You can see it a little bit in Jesus when he's talking. It's almost like a sly sort of smile. What I think he does when we pray to him, and we say, "Give me what we need, take care of this for my family," he says, "Okay." If you've ever bowled, you know how you can put the bumpers down? And you won't land in the gutter? That's how I think he answers prayers. That's how I think is his modus operandi. Because if we prayed for whatever we want and got whatever we want, or he just designed our life for us, where is free will in that? So I think we pray to him and we say, "Lord, guard and protect me." He says, cool, I'll do that. He puts the bumper guards down. But he's not going to guarantee us a strike. We've got to also throw the ball. That's good Catholic theology. That's cooperating with his grace. His grace is that we're not going to land in the gutter. But it doesn't guarantee us that we're going to... Whatever taught us that we were supposed to be entitled to a strike every single throw? Where did that come from? I don't know. I've been hitting one pin and being lucky if I do, these first few months of being a priest. So what he does is, I think, puts those bumpers down, and then we roll. But it's a game, and it's fun, and we shouldn't have to stress out about every decision that we make through this. So I'm not speaking as someone who's gotten out of anxiety. I am probably the most anxious priest in the Diocese of Austin. And have been called that many times. But I would never give that up for the world. Because when I meet someone else that's anxious, I'm like, awesome. Awesome. Because there's something I can speak to you here. And if I stopped, I don't know. So I used to pray, "Lord, deliver me from my anxiety, deliver me from my fear." That's not a bad prayer. You know, if it's really, really bringing you down, that's not a bad prayer at all. But now I just pray, like, "Lord, help me to be who you want me to be." And if he wants me to be a little bit anxious for a while because there's 2 or 3 students that need that, rock on. So thank you for listening to me for this long. I have no idea how long it's been. Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. So it's the students are good. They sometimes, I tell them sometimes, wow, you're really like hugging me a lot. You know, you're really with all my schedule and stuff. And their solution is to like hug tighter and want to meet more and stuff. But they're so good. It's such a beautiful community.
Is that what made you decide not to be an army? Did we met you a couple years ago? You told Eric and I
Sure.
to be an army priest. I'm just curious.
Sure. No,
Can
it
you
was
repeat the
Navy.
question?
Yeah.
I was wondering, when we met him several years ago when he was here, he said he wanted to be a priest in the army. And I'm just asking him. A chaplain? Yeah, an army chaplain.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually in the Navy, so I was in the Navy for about 4 years in the reserves. That was the initial plan to do. But then, in consultation with kind of the diocese and allocation of resources and that type of thing, I said, would you be willing to work in a parish? And as a priest, you, how do I say this well as it's still recording? You willingly consign yourself to be a tool. And I know that word has some negative connotations, but really it's the bishop's diocese, and priests serve in unity and at the leisure and pleasure of the bishop. So like my role is to be an extension of the bishop. So if he feels this is where I think that you're best placed, I smile and I do it. And so you never go in with any sense of like I'm going to do this, or I deserve this, or this is the only way I'm going to be a priest. As soon as you become a priest, one of the first things you do after you get the oil on your hands is you like put them in the hands of your bishop, you know, and say like at your service. So if he told me you're leaving St. Mary's tomorrow, I'd cry a little bit, but then I'd go and wear my nicest shirt to go see the new parish. Yeah. Oh.
Barry, I know it's been a while since we last saw you, but I just want to say what a gift you have been, not only to the priesthood, but to the time here at St. Vincent de Paul. When you were talking about your mother, and I know you choked up, I wanted to share the moment that I think it all wrapped up for me was after your ordination, when you did your first Mass. When we were all at in the parish hall, I cannot remember the parish that we were at, but it was your but all the priests were kind of hanging out, and everyone was leaving, and I asked the question, why are all these priests waiting here? And they said, well, they're all waiting for Mary's blessing. And so Father Danny was the first one, and he knelt down after some pictures were taken, and you had blessed him, but then your mother showed up, or stood there, and then took off her shoes and knelt in front of you. And I remember her kissing your hands, and how beautiful that picture was. But it reminds me of all the different talks we had in the past regarding your upbringing and your mother. But I just wanted to affirm just what a wonderful person you've come out to be, and I wish you well in the future. You're going to be a great priest, as we all know.
that calendar Pope Gregory?
Why are the blessings for the priest's first year more valuable than after?
You know, that's a great question, because I study canon law, and I think that's more of a tradition that has kind of crept into the church than anything like really. So like, if you're blessed on the last day of the priest's first year, so like June 7th at like 11:59, and I didn't finish the blessing until the very end, is it less of a? I think it's just a tradition. It's one of those that kind of has crept in over time, because the church never exists on its own. It always exists in the context of culture. So this new one has popped up recently, which is real interesting to me, in which guys will hear confessions with a purple stole, and then after their first few confessions, give the stole to their dad, who taught them, you know, what it is to be like a father. There are other ones too, like the oil on your hands, when you wipe that away, you give that to your mother, so that she can take that in her coffin when she goes, so that when she gets to heaven, it's like, hey. But to be honest with you, I've heard that before from so many places, but I don't know if that's an actual thing that's in any kind of document or anywhere. It's sort of like lore that is passed on.
Some of the statements that you've mentioned rang very true to me with the rediscovered Catholicism that some of us were able to get when the church gifted them. That book, to me, is awesome. Having been born, baptized, the whole, I have learned since I'm just about done with it.
It's a great book.
It is awesome. And it has really kind of, it's awesome. Just like your speech, your copy.
Yeah, it's a great book. And I'm glad that a lot of churches are actually gifting them out. It's part of like a program I think we're doing around the diocese. We're doing the same thing at Seminary.
No more questions?
Well, I'd love to give you all a blessing. Feel free to remain seated. The Lord be with you. Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life.
Thanks be to God.